Hey everybody, welcome back to Eggs the Podcast. But before we get started, I want to talk about our sponsor, Taylor Style. February is kind of a funny month. The year's moving, routines are back, and then suddenly Valentine's Day shows up on the calendar and reminds you that, you still have to show up like a functioning adult in the real world. For me, that's dinners, events, work stuff, weekends out, the moments where you want to look put together without overthinking it. And honestly, that's where Taylor fits into my life. I'm a member because it just removes friction. I don't have to stop. I don't have to plan outfits. I don't end up wearing the same thing over and over just because it's a safe option. And for people who've spent any amount of time watching the show, I've been a black t-shirt and jeans guy for a long time. I'm a subscriber right now, and every few weeks I get a box with hand-picked outfits chosen by a real stylist, refined by their AI. And the crazy part is they actually nail it most of the time. Stuff I would never go buy, but I end up wearing nonstop just because it works. Taylor, spelled Taelor, is a men's clothing rental subscription that uses AI and real human stylists to send you pieces that work together flawlessly and actually fit your life. For me, it means having clothing for work nights, date nights, meetings, travel, whatever February throws at you, without adding more decisions or stuff. If that sounds good to you too, Eggs listeners get 25% off their first month with code EGGS at taylor.style. That's Taelor.style. Promo code EGGS to save 25% off your first month with Taylor. That's Taelor. They handle the clothes so you can focus on everything else. Now, back to the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Eggs the Podcast. Today's special guest is Nathan Strum from Abbey Connect. How are you, Nathan? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Ryan. Nice to see you. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's kick off this thing from the very beginning. Let's talk a little about who you are, what you do today, and why we're talking.
Sure. So Nathan Strum, Abbey Connect, started the business about 20 years ago. I know you can't see all the gray hair, but it's there, I promise. And we started as a human receptionist service, and we still do that today. We answer phones for small businesses. And we've since launched a new AI receptionist, launched that in June, and have seen some really great adoption. And we're just really excited about this new world that we've entered.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I find particularly interesting about you because there's so many people that are like, the house is on fire, AI is going to kill us all, that kind of stuff, this attitude. But we found a few leaders kind of recently that are more kind of from your perspective, which is, go with it instead of against it, and actually we've launched a whole new company this year, and our whole thing too is kind of like, let's ride this AI wave versus, fight it tooth and nail until the end. The technology's here and it's not going anywhere. So it's good to embrace it. But we'll get more into that in a little bit. I wanted to talk to you first about kind of your journey, like sort of how you got to where you are. You mentioned you guys were starting on the phones. So, presumably this is some time ago. And, in the last 20 years, things have really developed for you. But were you always entrepreneurial or did you come from that roots? How did you end up starting your own business?
Yeah, I've come from those roots. My family, starting back from my great grandfather, who was a bail bondsman, and my parents, they've what I call serial entrepreneurs. And so they kind of raised me in the family business. We were baking bagels when I was 16 years old. And, that was my first job. But it's been a learning lesson. I've learned everything on the job, as most entrepreneurs these days do.
Well, it's so funny. So if the family business is baking bagels, how do you get from there to taking phone calls? Like, what's the transition like when you decide, hey, I'm going to start this business and here's what we're going to do?
Sure. Yeah. So my family actually decided to move out to Las Vegas and retire. And I thought that was kind of a laughing joke because there's no way my father and mother would retire. And so they started an office building, executive suite company, kind of like Regis or WeWork. And we answered phones for the clients in the building as part of the service and realized that we were good at it. And so we decided to start answering phones for companies outside of the building. And that's how we started Abbey Connect.
Oh, how funny. Well, so you started to touch on this a little bit, but let's talk about just sort of Abbey Connect's tenure. So you started 20 years ago, you're answering phones. I love the origin story here. But as you start to move down that path and you start to grow and you develop, there's some like sort of, I guess I would think of them as like being core tenets or core philosophies with you that are really around human connection and how you're trying to create sort of a collaborative environment between people And, now you're leveraging more technology maybe than you were in the past, but I imagine that ethos has sort of carried you throughout your career. Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a small business owner and family business, um, the way that we always realize back from cooking bagels and competing against Einstein and Starbucks, the way that we compete is by customer service. And so that, couldn't even holds true to every business. And it definitely carried through to the executive suites and the phone answering. But that's easy as a family when you're such tight knit to provide that customer service. But as you grow and you start adding new employees, keeping that great customer service is another challenge that you have to learn. And so what we learned really quickly was that it was all about culture. And if you provide a great culture and if people feel good about coming into work, then that's going to come across over the phones and they're going to create that good customer experience.
Yeah, well, it's a great point that you make. This idea about, I mean, obviously things are much easier at a small family level, but you're right. You would treat your family a certain way. And sometimes, like as businesses scale, you start to lose that sort of familial touch or whatever. But our former business, our creative agency, and even the work we're doing today is really relationship driven and people driven, and so this stuff is really resonating with me as I'm hearing you say it, because it's like, I guess, it's the happy chickens make great eggs, it's like, happy people, serve customers well. And, I think you mentioned something in there about just sort of trust. I mean, or maybe implied trust, which is, if I'm going to
Mhm.
let you answer phones on behalf of my company, I need to know that you're going to represent us in the best possible light and in the best possible way to the people who could be our prospective business. And so I think that that's a really critical point that you make there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So as you started to, I guess, move along the road, and you start working with culture, I think it's an interesting point because company culture in particular became one of these buzzy words for a little while. Really
Yeah.
got hot during COVID, where everybody was like, oh, well, culture is, cool swag, and culture is, meetings where we get to joke around or have a cocktail, or, like, I mean, culture got really weird for a little while. And but I wonder if you could talk about sort of scaling culture. And I imagine, I mean, I don't know how you guys are set up, but I suspect that there's probably some remote work involved and stuff like that. Maybe not everybody's in the same building. And so I wondered if you talk about just sort of, first of all, creating that corporate culture, but then how do you communicate that to your people and get everyone to actually come on board?
Yeah, sure. So we actually are mostly all in the same office. We
Oh,
do
cool.
have some employees working remotely, but 85% of us work in the Las Vegas office. Um, you know, there's the foo-foo part of culture, which is great, but then there's the difficult part of culture. And so I think that part gets overlooked a lot, especially because it's just not as sexy to talk about. But for example, some of the things that we've done that have helped us be successful is we're really strict on certain things like gossip. Gossip is like a cancer. And anytime that there's gossip, it just can tear an organization apart. And a lot of people don't even know what gossip is. They don't understand the difference between gossip and work talk. So we have to spend a lot of time educating our staff on what gossip is, and we have to make sure that we're very strict on it. So we're very lenient on a lot of things, but this is one thing that we're not lenient on. So that's one of the non, sexy parts of
Yeah.
culture.
Well, I think it makes sense to focus on something like that. And to your point about definitions, I mean, even hearing you say it, I'm going, oh, okay, well, he means water cooler talk, just sitting around and visiting with one another, and being comrades at the office or whatever. But yeah, no, what you're talking about is right. I mean, those kinds of sort of internal monologues where people are sharing, this kind of, I don't know, it's the talking behind the back, it's all that stuff, even if it's not about the company, but maybe it's somebody in the company or somebody who, is a coworker or whatever. Like, there's almost no good that can come from that.
There's a lot of nuance to it, like you're talking about. If I'm talking to somebody about somebody else's performance, and that person I'm speaking to does not have a direct relationship with that person, then number one is it's not helpful because they can't help them. And number two, I'm then poisoning that person's thoughts about the other person without allowing that person to maybe give their point of view. So there's a lot of little nuances that you have to navigate. And we've learned that over the years. We've been pretty good with it.
Yeah, well, and I think if people really are looking for like a contemporary example of this too, I mean, social media is gossip,
Oh,
right? I
yeah.
mean, all you see all day is people talking about people they don't know, and
Yeah. Yeah.
about the decisions those people make or whatever it is, from politics to celebrity to whatever. All these people have opinions on every living thing, but they're sitting and talking, and then and it gets to a point, like, at least in my view, where now it's almost so muddy, like you don't know what's right, you don't know what's accurate. And so for me, I've basically tuned everything out on social. Like, I don't even really do it anymore. And
Yeah.
but it's because it became a very unreliable partner. So in a business, that too, if you've got people saying, oh, well, CEO's doing this, or so and so thought that, or look, Jerry's gone this weekend and he's probably doing this, but,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like that kind of talk, it basically gets to a point where I think even if it isn't dangerous in the sense that maybe they're not spreading bad things, but just they're forming opinions on people that you don't even know. And that's going to decide their decision making process. And it could be totally based in something that's a fiction entirely.
Yeah. 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 No, I love how you say it. Um, and it could be based on fiction, but it also, everybody has their own point of view. So your point of view is correct, but the other person's point of view is correct also, and they can both coexist.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Abbey Connect. And I want to just talk about sort of the growth of the company over the years. And maybe we could talk maybe in some key milestones. I have to imagine as you grew this business outside of a family operation, there were some sort of, like, I guess, the entrepreneurial hurdles that people start running into, head count and who to hire and these kinds of things. I wonder if you could share any, maybe really memorable experiences, and they could be good or for bad, but, some challenge that you bumped into that was a big deal for your company at the time, and how you navigated that, either for the better or for the worse. What was the thing you learned?
Sure. Yeah, no, great question. I think for me, the biggest thing is all the ceilings that we hit. And every ceiling that we hit, we had to completely throw out the rule book and completely remake the company. And so going from just the family to hiring a couple employees, obviously the structure and the communication had to change. And then once you get to 10 employees, all the communication functions that you've instilled don't work anymore, and you need something that scales. And then you go from 10 to 50, and your HR systems start to break down, and so you have to throw out the HR rule book and remake yourself. And then you get to 100, and you start seeing other problems. You have to completely throw out the rule book. So I think reaching those phases, it's challenging because you built something and you're proud of it, and then you realize what you've built isn't going to work anymore. And you really have to be okay with throwing things out and starting over.
Well, and would you consider that sort of, I guess, if you were looking at CEOs or business leaders, I mean, I think people move kind of at different paces on different things sometimes, but do you think that one real hurdle that CEOs run into, either from your own experience or maybe from others that you've talked to, where maybe they stick too long with things? So maybe they got to employee number 5 and they should have been switching up these systems, but they didn't until they got to employee 10. So then the problem was much bigger or more, difficult to deal with because they waited too long to get something done.
Absolutely. But on this flip side, you don't want a knee jerk reaction to every challenge that you see as a business owner. You need to work through things sometimes. So finding out when those ceilings are happening is a key element. You don't want to sit around too long, but yet you don't want to break everything prematurely.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So let's talk just, I guess, as we continue working through sort of the Abbey Connect story. You've grown the team, you've got more people on that now. Just by virtue of being around for the last 20 years, technology is moving, and it's moving all the time. And now it's moving even faster than ever, maybe. And so you no doubt started integrating some new technologies and new things along the way. But what do you think? I mean, now that we're getting into sort of this AI era and things like that, where do you think what did the integration look like for you as you're starting to bring these things on? And which technologies are you just going, that one's not going to stick, but this one is. And so we need to ride this one. Like, how are you picking and choosing how to move forward?
Well, I think overall, AI is so exciting and it's so powerful. But I do think that it's people are overstating what it's going to do. Um, that doesn't mean that it's not going to revolutionize our society, but it does mean that it's a little bit different than some of the people talking heads are explaining it. And I know that with our own service, there's some fascinating things that we're doing with AI over the phone. But there's a lot of edge cases that just cannot be planned for and AI cannot handle. And that's when you still need that human. You need that human to be there to take that call when it doesn't go well for the AI. Anytime, for example, in our service, we listen for points of friction. So anytime somebody has to repeat themselves 3 times, or let's say somebody uses certain keywords that make it known that they're upset with the way that the call is going, or let's say that they have a heavy accent and the AI can't understand it, or they just say, "I want to speak to a human because I just don't like you." Um, you have to be ready to take that call as a human and to be able to provide that customer service seamlessly. And so that's how we're building our technology to be able to use the human and the AI um, with the same call path, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So as you started to roll this out and you start rolling out these AI receptionists and people are starting to interact with these things, what do you think is your biggest surprise or the biggest aha that you've had so far in terms of, you know, people interacting with it, you know, are people liking it more than you thought or hating it more than you thought? You know, have you had any big insights come from that yet?
Absolutely. That question is perfect for this situation we had. We were shocked. So we have an attorney that we've been answering for 3 or 4 years, human side reception service. And she came to us and she said, "Hey, listen, I need more service. I need my calls answered after hours, but I don't want to pay for it." We've all heard it, right? We're all prepared for that statement. So we said, "Hey, listen, okay, we have an idea. We have this new AI service, and we'd love to turn it on to your calls at night." What I haven't told you yet is she's an attorney for elderly law. And we knew if we could have her clientele communicate with this technology in a human like way and not get frustrated, we've got it down. Fast forward to today, she's one of our biggest advocates. I mean, she
Wow.
loves it and she pays for it. The free
That's how you
trial
know
is
she, yeah,
over.
that's how you know she likes it. She's paying
Yeah,
for it now.
yeah. And they communicate with it. They're happy. There's obviously a percentage of calls that get routed to a human, but nothing more than the general public. And it's just great to listen to hear them communicate with it on a human-like level.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, and actually, I mean, now that you say that, it seems like it might actually work better for folks like that. You know, maybe they're using simpler language or they're, you know, the problem they're trying to solve is maybe a little more clearly defined. And
Yeah,
and so it seems like maybe those guys would actually be a decent audience for AI. But I
yeah,
certainly wouldn't have thought of it, you know. And I also would have thought they would have immediately been a little bit skittish to it. So
yeah.
the fact that they're having these conversations, I think, are both great insights. So in general, as you know have been working in communications for a long time, you know you're trying to build these relationships and leveraging technology, all this stuff. You know what, generally speaking, if you're talking to other CEOs, startup founders, people like that, you know what customer communication trends are the small businesses underestimating now? Like what are they doing or not doing that could be costing them as it pertains to communication?
Well, I think that the phone still gets overlooked a lot. I think, I've been hearing it for the past 20 years that the phone is going to go away at some point. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I think not paying attention to who's answering your phones. I know I know I'm plugging our own product here, but I believe that that's a true a point I think that CEOs are overlooking.
Yeah, I think that's good. Well, and then to that extent, are there things that you're seeing with other business leaders that they're wasting money on today in terms of automation that you know you would say, oh well, people are investing way too heavily in that, and that's really actually working that well. We should be doing something else. Have you encountered that, or do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I actually think the live chat widget on the website, I think that people are overestimating in that. We actually sell a service where we answer your live chat for you. And we do have a lot of clients that love it. But I think overall it's not, it hasn't really had the adoption that I think people think it will.
Well, it's interesting because, like, I mean, just thinking about communications and human relationships, I guess my gut, and maybe it's me projecting, would have been that I would love to have like the chat bots be more effective, right? Like, I don't want to get on the phone with you. I just want to chat with you and handle my problem and move on. Like one company that does this really well is American Express. Like, whenever I
Mhm.
need it, my little chat bot's always in the corner. I can jump on it. It's actually most of the time I end up just going right to a human. But nonetheless, the chat is right there. It's really easy for me to use. Then with some other companies, like US Bank is another company that we work with, and their chat, for example, is really good at finding like directory items and things that are in their knowledge base, but terrible at helping you actually solve problems. And so to your point, they've probably put a ton of money into that thing, but
Yeah.
what they've got it doing isn't even the thing that I think most customers would want from it. Like, I would be able to want to get right to a representative and solve my problem. Instead, it's like, well, are you sure you don't mean business banking? Are you sure you don't, and it's like, eventually you can jump through the hoops and get to who you need to talk to. But it's interesting. And it's one of the things that I think I've really observed with AI, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit too, which is there's kind of this thing, and you mentioned earlier the talking heads and how everybody's talking about AI in a way that's kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit weird. They're talking about it like it's adversarial or something like this, and that it's almost like it's actually thinking, not that it's just,
Yeah. Yeah.
algorithmic and stuff.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
they say the words, artificial intelligence, and I think people are buying the hype. And
Yeah.
if you really understand it, you understand it's not really thinking. It's just, it's doing this thing. And but what ended up happening for this while is I noticed, like with SaaS companies in particular, everybody was just bolting AI onto their thing. So, now I've got
Hmm.
this AI thing, and you can pay $10
Hmm.
more a month, and now you have AI.
Yep.
And most of the time, it seems like, with only a couple exceptions that I can think of, it's like, what are we even doing here? Like, it takes me more time to use your AI than just to read the quick help document on how to do what I'm trying to do, or whatever. And and I've found a lot of people doing that. So I wonder, in your experience, maybe you're seeing something similar, but what are your thoughts on sort of early adoption of AI and who's doing it the right way?
Well, I'll admit that we're guilty of that. In the very beginning, when the revolution started in 2022, ChatGPT, um, we bolted on some AI functionality, and it you know it was useful if you did use it, but it didn't change the paradigm shift of what our service is. Now with the AI receptionist, that's completely changed. This is a whole product that's driven by AI. But to your point, bolting on the services, I think we all fell into that trap, and we thought that it was going to help our businesses, and it just didn't. Um, I think does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. I was basically just trying to get to the point. There are a lot of people using it maybe in the wrong way, and I think part of it is how we think
Mm,
about it and all that stuff. Which is, we're integrating this into our product. It's helping you. I mean, maybe it's kind of useful. Maybe you can navigate around, or you can ask in more of natural language type questions and that kind of thing. But I found that for the most part, everybody was charging you 10 or 15 bucks. They're saying, hey, you have access to all these models, you have all this stuff, but really all you're doing is trying to locate like a project in a project management platform, or you're trying to find, some asset that you've used before or something. Like, it doesn't really require AI outside of, this is a sophisticated search approach. So it seems like there were a lot of people kind of bolting it on like it was going to be this magic bullet, that now our software is amazing. It was bad before, but now with AI it's amazing. And I think in a lot of cases people were just using it wrong.
yeah. Do you remember when the iPhone came out? All the apps, they
Hmm.
were useless.
Yeah.
I mean, it took years until a company like Uber came along and really, created a game-changing service. But the apps were just wrappers to websites. There was no utility to them other than going to a website and not having to log in. And I
Yeah.
think that's where we're at with AI. I think that we will get to a point where we're getting some really useful tools, and we're seeing some companies like Abbey develop those tools, but we're still seeing a lot of the slop,
Yeah.
as they say.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right. I mean, maybe this is just part of tech evolution, right? I mean, you've got to have your
Mhm.
early adopters and people jump in and they push that technology to its bounds. And then, version 2 comes out and now we can get even further and further and further. Like I've even noticed just in my own AI journey, and working with numerous different platforms for numerous different things, from coding to design to writing to, whatever. It's, I've really seen the evolution, or this arc so far. And it's like, every iteration is just a little better and a little better and a little better. And it does seem like we're maybe starting to plateau a little bit. Like it's not quite so hockey stick that it used to be, but nonetheless, it's getting better and stronger. And it's, so, I mean, if you put fast forward 5 years, what does that look like then? So,
Yeah.
so that's pretty exciting. Um, Something I think that's kind of interesting about your sort of, I don't know if we call it your business philosophy or your management style or what it is, but one thing that you think a specific value on is how entry level employees transition into these roles.
Mhm.
And I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about just sort of, this focus on entry level people and what it is you hope to achieve by, I guess, sort of thinking about them specifically, because I think oftentimes those folks are overlooked.
Yeah, thank you. So, number one is we've always known that our moat is people. Our moat is people and culture, and that's what we're good at. That's what we're always going to be good at, and that's our North Star. So, even as this AI revolution hit, we knew it's all going to be about people. And even if we do get into these tools, it's about people. And so we knew that we were going to have to bring these people along with us. And we hire for personality and not for skills. That's part of our culture. 99% of the people at Abbey started as a receptionist and worked their way up from that entry level position. And so we started very early with getting people comfortable with AI. We started talking about using it in our personal lives, and we started a Teams group and just kind of talked about different use cases and different fun things we were doing with it, and just starting getting people comfortable with it. And then we started talking about the jobs that we foresee, coming in Abbey at Abbey in the future. And then we started building out progression plans for those jobs. And then we started building out in our learning management system classes and courses for people to take to learn AI and to be ready for that next part of their career. So even if they take what they've learned and use it at Abbey, or if they take what they've learned and use it somewhere else, as long as they're learning and growing and keeping up, that helps our culture. And so that's what we're focused on.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I think that, I think if anybody really looks back at themselves and thinks of jobs they've had and things like that, I mean, a lot of times we get in because we know somebody or we have a friend or somebody vouches for us or whatever it is. And a lot of times you get hired for a role only to find out the role is something else entirely. And you just
Yeah.
grow and you learn on the job and you get good at it. And that's what you do. And,
Yeah.
but if you were to try and hire for that job specifically, like even my own son has dealt with this recently. He's 19 and he's trying to find work, but it's like, but dad, I do all these things. Like I could, so I want to apply for this job as a, a barista somewhere or something, but I do all these things. So they're trying to hire for this very specific thing. And I'm like, all you got to do is talk to them about the things you do that are relevant to being a barista, and
Yeah.
it's like what you
Yeah.
were just describing, personality things. It's, hey, are you easy to work with? Are you coachable? Are people going to be, are you friendly? These kinds of things. Like they'll teach you how to run the coffee machine. You don't need to be an expert to run the coffee machine to get the
Right.
job as a barista.
Yeah.
Instead, they'll teach you that part, and so I think it's really interesting looking at, or trying to understand the other skills. Right. And some of that, I think, ends up being a hurdle for folks, when they want a job or something and they go, well, I don't know how to, I don't know how to do XYZ, but I'd really like to work for this company and I don't know how to do it. And, but the reality is, like, if they're hiring on other features, if it isn't something highly technical where you have to be like a, an engineer or something with specific training, most of the time you'll learn on the job. And so by looking for these different characteristics, I think that's a really interesting way or a smart way to hire. But it's also, I guess, really in tune with the kind of work you're doing. Are there other characteristics besides just sort of personality that you would look into, maybe more than technical ability in like AI augmented workforce? Like what other stuff are you looking for in an employee?
Well, we look for somebody that has an open mind and wants to learn. And if you have an open mind and you want to learn, that can take you a long way. We also look for critical thinking. So that's a skill that's going to be very um, useful in the AI world. And we also look for people that can think outside of the box. And so that's a good mix of a
Yeah.
personality that we like to hire for.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things, and this is how we've been positioning AI with everyone we're talking to, is like as a tool, right? This is a thing to augment you and make you stronger. And so I think that, to your point, by training these people earlier, getting them into these environments where they're almost like working hand in glove with the
Mm-hmm.
AI versus it, looking at it as an adversary or being concerned that you're going to lose your job or something, I think is actually a really smart play. And so the fact that you do that is, I think, a really smart thing to do. And I just think that, again, it's just trying to put the focus on people or the relationships between people. It seems to me that AI, as weird as it sounds, may just be one more relationship that we have. We have a relationship with this tool or this technology, and that's actually going to make us better people. What do you think about sort of this, I guess, melding of, humanity and technology?
Well, I like that you look at it as a relationship with the technology. Never heard anybody say it like that in this context, but I do think that if you look at it in that point of view, it will help you figure out how to use it. But as far as meshing AI with humans, I think one of the and you touched on this earlier. The talking heads, yeah, they're talking about it in scary ways, but they're also talking about it like it's a religion, like it's God. And I also love how you said it's just an algorithm. It doesn't think for itself. It definitely doesn't have a soul. Um, but that doesn't mean that it's not extremely powerful. And like any tool, if you learn how to use that tool, that's your relationship with it. How do I use this tool to better my life or better my job? And that's a great way to think about it.
Well, and it's no different, I mean, it's maybe a more techie version, but it's no different than the contractor and his tools or the, accountant and his calculator or whatever. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
we have these relationships, people and their tools, right? And I think, whether it's in communications like you're talking about, or if you're just trying to, I don't know, be a better marketer and you're using AI as something to bounce ideas off of, for example, that's I mean, it can be a tool that really makes your writing stronger or makes your ability stronger. I think that the danger is, becoming too reliant on it, for example. And I don't know, maybe you could make a comparison, some contractor that, focuses too heavily on one aspect of their technology, and then when that breaks, all of a sudden they're out of business. So it's,
Yeah.
you don't want to go too far into the waters, but I think as long as you're kind of, hanging in there together, I think it's not a bad place to be. um oh, go ahead.
Well, I like to use something until it breaks, and then I figure out how to use it ongoing. And I've broken AI day after day, and I've felt the boundaries of it. And in real life, let me tell you, do not ask ChatGPT for legal advice. Do not ask it for creative advice in marketing. And also, do not let it scan every single resume and tell you who to hire. These are some of the lessons I've already learned.
No, and I think that comes to, to your point. I like the idea. I always think about Jurassic Park, right? And the raptors are checking the electric fence and seeing where they can break through. And I
Yeah.
feel like with these tech, especially with emerging technologies and things that are sort of on the come up, you can really start to kind of poke and prod and figure out where the weak spots are or where the gaps are. Like
Yeah.
I've managed to accomplish some pretty incredible things with like coding and stuff like that. Things I used to hire teams for. Now I'm able to comp up on my own.
Yeah.
But if somebody came behind me and looked at my code, it's probably terrible and it's probably full of errors and all this stuff. But the AI just patches and works over and patches and works over, And so, I mean, I have no doubt that it's not perfect, but that's okay because for what I'm trying to do, if I'm demoing websites or whatever, but I would never do one that was production based that I built myself that somebody's got to live on, Like it's just, I'm not there yet. Now, maybe soon, or maybe it is already. I know a lot of people really like Claude Code and some of these other platforms. So maybe it's already there. But I think for a novice or like for me, like I've run software teams from like a managerial standpoint. So I could talk to
Mhm.
the software team or talk to ChatGPT or whatever from the perspective of I understand how software works. And that's given me I guess the little add-on or the superpower of now being able to code it too.
Yeah.
where in the past I would have had to hire somebody for that. But if I didn't
Yeah.
know what I was doing at all and I wasn't asking the right questions or whatever, you could end up with really, murky output. So I think it's a good point though. I wanted to ask you a couple questions about just sort of leadership in general. We talked earlier about sort of how Abbey was growing and you got to 10 to 50 employees, et cetera. What do you think the biggest changes were for you and when? So, for a lot of young entrepreneurs, I mean, I've heard the numbers, around 5 employees, everything changes. Around,
Yeah.
50 employees, everything changes. And I think you've kind of cited both of those as milestones. But I think you guys are up around 100 people, maybe more now. And so what are the big things that have changed for you or that you've encountered along the way that would be, I don't know, a flag in the sand that says, oh man, at that point we really had to pivot?
Well, I think a lot of it is internal. Um, for me, that was a challenge. So, for example, when I started my career and very early on, I was very focused on product, and I still am. I still love product, and I still love looking at how the customer thinks and what problems we can solve for the customer. I think that's a good one of the foundations of the business. But what I found out really quickly was somebody in my position, I had to be worried about the people, right? And so I had to really change how I view business, how I view our business, and how I interact with people. And that was an internal change that I had to make, and it was very difficult for me. And so making that migration, I would say, was one of the biggest challenges that I personally have come across.
Okay. Well, and then maybe in that vein, do you have one, I don't know, thing that comes to mind if you talk about maybe the decision that took you the longest to make and why? Like, is there something, we talked earlier about people dragging their feet or moving too fast. Is there something in your career that you could point to that's like, oh man, I really should have moved more quickly on this, but I didn't. And, I should have, and here's why.
Firing people.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
it's tough. It's always tough to part ways, and sometimes it's easy, but sometimes it's very difficult because there's a couple of instances that I can think of, and these are the real difficult ones. So when you have an employee that is extremely smart, extremely capable, and extremely experienced, and has a very good success record, but they don't work out in your company, and it's 9 times out of 10 or 10 out of 10 is a culture fit, and letting go of somebody like that is really tough because it's hard as a business owner to attract the right talent. And when you have somebody that is truly that smart and that capable, it's really hard to part ways with them. But at the same time, if there's a culture mismatch, it just tears up the entire company, and you just cannot live with that.
Yeah, well, and it makes sense too. This might dovetail into some of the stuff you talked about earlier with gossip and things like that. Like if you have a person like this, but they're generally unhappy, unhappy people talk and they tell people about it. And,
Yeah,
that could help maybe poison the well or change the opinions of other people. So that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you too, and we kind of touched on it before, but I wanted to see if we could put a little bit of a wrapper on it. Just this idea of how do you balance innovation speed with operational stability? So you mentioned early, a couple, ready, fire, aim moments where you were bolting on AI and stuff like that. But as you've started to grow with it, at what rate or how do you balance sort of, I guess, that speed of gathering innovation or working with new technologies, yet keeping your product stable?
Well, that question, I guarantee you, has changed. The answer to that is changing on a daily basis now. I so we've expanded to San Francisco, and we're hiring engineers here. And we've decided to come straight to the heart, where all the great AI engineers are. And I'm speaking to some of these engineers, and things are changing on a daily basis. You talked about Claude Code, and you talked about some of the code that you're developing that has a lot of technical debt. You would be shocked. You'd be shocked at what you could do setting up the right environment. And I could talk to you offline about this. It almost makes you think that SaaS is dead because you could think about anything And this is the way the world is going. You could think about anything and you could have it built for you with a couple of clicks. And what does that do? What does that do to a software company? What does that do to what they used to consider their moat? That we can just think of something. I'll give you an example. I hope the guys at Atlassian aren't listening to this because we're still heavily relying on you and we still love you. But our engineer wants to completely replace Jira. And I was thinking, you know what? This could be a 2-month project. This could be a 3-month project. He's talking about doing it overnight.
Oh, wow.
He's talking about doing it overnight, about really creating our own Jira system, ticketing system for engineers with a couple of clicks of a couple of buttons. And so you got to really think about that. What does that do to our society? What does it do to all the businesses out there?
Well, and it's interesting too, and in my own experience, and yeah, I'd love to visit with you a little bit when we get off the call, but I've built a couple little apps and things like that on my own using some of these vibe coding platforms and stuff like that. And, my gut was that they had to be kind of fragile, or like, these aren't going to be good because they're AI just thrown together or whatever. And then I've run these things and I've been using them now for months. Like, we're building proprietary tools in house and, stuff like that. And it's one of the big focuses with this new company that we've launched is, building proprietary IP and things that we can own. So, maybe one day we sell this thing, or maybe we can be acquired because we have some process or something that's unique. And so we're trying to build these new tools, but like, I can kind of build it and try it now. And like, I don't need a whole army of engineers to help me out. And I think if you had like one good, competent engineer, now you're getting the throughput of 3 to 5 engineers that are all pretty good, and it's like, it's amazing what you can do. Like, AI has really supercharged that career. And, for maybe junior or entry level devs, I feel a little bad for them because there's some of this, although I think there's still parts all over the world. Just the junior devs will be made better through AI too. And, so I think there's still opportunity there, but like, if any of the jobs are in danger, it might be that one. So,
yeah. And, Anthropic says they're using AI for 100% of their coding now.
Oh, wow. Yeah. See, and 100%. I think from what I've heard anyway, I've heard that Claude Code is the best one out there right now. And I've used various through different platforms. And yeah, I mean, I've had really good experience with it. And it seems to get, even for me being a little bit of a novice in terms of development, I've found that it understands my requests and it builds the things that I'm trying to build most quickly. And it does it with a lot of the things that I'm not smart enough to mention in advance. So like things that I forget and then later come back to and go, oh crap, I should have said this first. And now like it builds with the intelligence to put all that stuff back in place. So, I mean, it's pretty incredible what it's doing. So we're starting to get to the end here. I wonder if we talk just quickly about, what do you think customer experience looks like in 5 years if companies are doing this the right way?
Sure. Well, I think that we're going to be communicating more and more with AI. I think you're going to start to see agents. I'm sure that it sounds like you're deep into it, so you know about agents. But I think a lot of people don't, and they don't really they don't understand what the power is. So I think that that's going to be a big part of the future. I digressed. I don't know if you read this in the news, but there's a Reddit-style social media company for agents.
Oh, funny.
And so these agents are going to this social media like Reddit website and communicating. And they're talking about humans. They're talking about what the humans are telling them to do, and they're kind of like exchanging notes.
Yeah, see, they're gossiping. We got to get these AI guys on.
They are gossiping.
Oh, how funny! No, I haven't heard about that. I mean, it's kind of hilarious, but but see, that's just going to fuel the whole "we're more intelligent" thing. We can't have these robots thinking they're actually thinking. That's where stuff goes sideways.
I know.
So, all right, cool. Well, let's. Where can people start to track you down, connect with Abbey Connect if they're interested in learning more about the product or the service, or if they'd like to connect with you online? Where are the best places people can get in touch?
Yeah, I'd love them to come to abbey.com, our website, and try a free trial of our service. And they can also find us on social media. My handle is Nathan Strum, and our company's handle is Abbey Connect.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, and for people wondering, it's ABBY, by the way, Abby. So yeah, be sure to check it out. It's great. The product looks really cool and exciting. I wish I had a need for people answering my phones, but we don't have enough calls yet. But hopefully that'll be a problem I have to solve before too long. So, well, thank you so much, Nathan. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.